Can the members online hear us okay?
Good morning, Brian Smith. I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
I can hear you guys loud and clear. The time is now 6 p.m. I'll call this scheduled McMinnville Fire District meeting to order. I'll now call on our clerk to do roll call of direct.
I don't have my list in front of me. Director Sparrow. Here. Treasurer or Secretary Pratt. Here. Treasurer Traff. Here. Vice President Smith.
Here.
And President Gardner. We also have district attorney for the district. I keep wanting to call him district attorney. Truman Stone is online.
All right. Now I will call on, let's go with Director Traff to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Now would be the time that we would address any changes to the agenda. Is there any changes to the agenda proposed other than what was in our packet that was sent out? Hearing none. Consent agenda looks bare as well. So we'll skip over that. Financial report. We don't have that right now. So now we'll move on to public comment. Public comments limited to 3 members per person. Other than that, we're open to any public comment. First, I'll call on our clerk to let us know if there's anybody in the audience that would like to provide public comment this evening. If there is, please step forward to the mic, state your first and last name and your address, and then we'll start the 3-minute timer.
I didn't receive any comment cards or individual comment cards. I'll double check. No one wants to speak. Is there anyone online who would like to speak? Please raise your hand if you would.
All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next session of our meeting and now close the public comment period. So our first order of business is to approve budget resolution 2023-04. And I'll call on the chief to brief us on that and refer fellow directors to your packet and the memo in your packet.
I'm going to share my screen with you, Mr. President. Just 2 seconds here, please. Did I get out of the Zoom? No, there it is. I dropped it. Okay. So I'll start by sharing my staff report. Mostly because I wanted to just go on the record and make sure that everyone understands why we're doing the process that we're doing this year. Oregon revised statutes requires a normal district to run of the full budgeting process from the start to finish. But because of the time of our election process, it makes an exception for districts that were formed in May and June of the same year that they are starting up. With the district starting July and the election occurring in May and June, there's not enough time to follow the time criteria and the budget requirements as outlined by law. So we are given exemptions to do that. And as a result, we have not had the ability to do the advertising and the timeframes for hiring, or not hiring, but appointing budget committees to get through the process. But we still have the statutory requirements to adopt the budget, identify appropriations, and basically establish the tax levy so that we can through the resolution process. So this evening, a part of your budget has already been through a budget process through the city because of the contract that we have with the city for services for the first 6 months. So I'll start walking through some of the outlines and some of the processes, but I wanted to go online is that while we are not following traditional ORS, we are absolutely in compliance with ORS due to the time frame of the election process as we move forward. Quick screens here, because I want to start off with this year, because we have a contract with the city and the city had run their budget process already prior to us, and we were a part of that process. All right. The first slides that I'll be sharing you, and I'll just walk through this slowly. You all received the LB forms that are going to be our base budget for this upcoming year. Within the LB forms, there's a large money documented in professional services throughout the LB forms. This document that I have right here is all of that money. It's the first 6 months of allocation of the city costs. So this is the amount of money that the city is has authorized to spend through their budget process for the costs. Let me start off by saying that we built our budget this year based on our traditional budgets. Our M&S, our staffing numbers were the same. So all of our budgets were built off of the numbers that we had the previous year and based on contingency. So I'll have some additions in here I'll share with you, but our fuels and services, M&S line items were all very consistent and even lowered in some cases because we were trying to build a conservative budget at the startup. There are a couple of line items that are a little higher and there was nothing we could do about those, fuel being one of those, EMS supplies being another one. Those costs are outrageous and they continue to balloon. So some of those costs have been modified to reflect the increases in those areas. So we started with a normal traditional budget with all the line items that we had. And we added in the charges that the city was going to charge us for services, professional services, whether it was an IS and HR or finance or whatever the case may be. And then all that hodgepodge of mix of what the city approved for our normal expenditures, plus the city added what you'll see in the LBs, and I'll walk through those as we go through them. But as you go through these funds, everyone can see what I'm looking at here. We break into 3 funds. We have fire operations, we have prevention, and we have ambulance operation or ambulance services. So this is the fire operations section. These personnel and services are based on the wages and benefits package that were projected with the COLAs and step increases built in. So all of these numbers reflect the increases that were negotiated through CBA or given to the non-rep individuals as a matter of norm. And that was a 4% increase across the board. It covers employee events. We cover insurance, liability, property, telecommunications, uniforms, protective clothing. And remember that everything that the city budgeted for, the majority of what the city budgeted for in the normal line item is about 50% of what our actual budget is, because we have a second half of the year that we funded also. This is how we break out our budget for the city. This is how we have broken out our budget for the city, but we didn't have a software program set that we could kind of run it through the whole process because we didn't have the line items built into the second half of the city's budget, exempting us from, we couldn't tie to the city budget and produce the second half of the year. So that's why we did the LBs as the base form for the budget process. As you go into the line items within the LB, you'll see professional services as a single line, but there are a lot of items in here: attorneys, services, new employee physicals for regular. All of those items fit under those professional services line item and their sub accounts. Maintenance and rental contracts. We have a plethora of maintenance and rental contracts in there. Sprinkler systems, NFPA vehicle inspections, breathing apparatus bench testing, a lot of those types of things. Hoses, nozzles. And then the one thing that's been added in, one of the things that's been added in that you'll see here is YCOM fees. We have not traditionally paid for YCOM fees out of the fire department budget. It was paid out of emergency communications budget within the city's budget. So that's a cost on top of what our normal traditional fire department budget would have been as the new district. And the YCOM budget basically took the breakdown that YCOM builds for all of their service groups, and took the McMinnville rural, the old McMinnville Rural Fire Protection District, and the city budget for fire and EMS, and just made those into one line item. So they didn't modify formulas, they didn't do anything different. They just took those two and put them together for us as far as charges. Fire prevention and life safety. Again, this is for 6 months. It covers the wages and benefits of our fire marshal or our deputy fire marshal. It also covers professional services and education, memberships and professional services, and any licensing that goes along for those individuals. If I'm going too fast or you have questions, don't hesitate. Don't bother. Stop me. Charges for service on the ambulance side. We charge transport fees for ambulance services. We're charging, I don't have the exact rates off the top of my head, about $2,100 or $2,200 a call, plus mileage. The transport fees that you see there are for the first 6 months minus 2 months, because July and August are basically, we are running on a modified accrual accounting system. So services that were provided in the previous fiscal year that we get money in on this before the books close in July and August get posted to the previous fiscal year. So that's 4 months of revenue shown there. That's not 6 months of revenue, because 2 months are being posted into the fund from before the year before. We have a fire med service, and those are some of the fees we expect to bring in from the fire med service, and then professional service or personnel services on ambulance. So we break our ambulance out. Our ambulance line staff were broken out by a study that was done way before I got here. 65-35 personnel services for line staff are 65% ambulance, 35% fire. Building is flops. Building is 75% fire, 25% ambulance. So when you see personnel splits and those types of things, it does two things for us. When we get into some of the revenues that aren't in this list, we have to demonstrate the true cost of ambulance service to get our GEMT dollars. And so if we break out our EMS calls versus fire calls and split process, it makes it simpler to file for the GEMT dollars at the end of the day. Is it an accurate representation? Well, it was accurate when it was done. It's probably one of those things that we should take a look at in the future, but not something I would want to jump on right at the moment on how that split out is. But that is why we have personnel services in both ambulance and fire. The same individuals are split. Myself, I'm split 50 ambulance, or maybe I'm 100 fire. I don't know. However my split is. No, I'm 75-25 fire, 25 ambulance. Assistant chief ops is 50-50, training is 75-25. So this includes all of our PERS and the personnel, all of the utilities and the split, obviously, fleet maintenance, professional services on the backside. We have all of those items, OHA licensing, that kind of stuff fall into professional services. And so that's how it's laid out. YCOM is split between the two, fire and ambulance. And then in the capital outlay, in this is the only place you'll actually see the purchase of that second ambulance that we've been working on. That is funded by the ARPA dollars from the city's ARPA funds. That we'll be taking delivery of that, I'm hoping by the end of August as the second ambulance. We had the first retro or refurbished done. We'll be bringing this second one in probably the end of August. And those are from ARPA dollars. That's not, it shows the money coming in as a revenue, but also is being paid by the ARPA dollars, not by the city. So that's what is in the city's budget that is running this department for the first 6 months. Before I jump into the LBs and kind of walk you through that part of it, are we good with that? You have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Regarding the YCOM line item. It's under fire administration and also under the ambulance, so they're separate fees for YCOM.
Yeah, so they're broken out so that we could identify the costs of where the costs were coming from.
Okay.
There's two line items. One's for fire and one's for Mac rural fire consolidation. So that one, the $3,000 one was the rural district's cost, and the $26,000 one is the city's cost. That's half of it. There's half in fire and there's half in ambulance. So it's $169,000 for the year for the total YCOM cost. All right, let me switch out here. Share. LB. All right, so on the first page of our LB form is our resources. License and permits, that is very much, we go out and do fees for events and permits and those types of things. That's for the inspection services and the permit processing. So those are those dollars coming from. The federal FEMA grant is a grant that we've applied for. We don't know whether we'll get it or not, but we still allocate for the revenue in and the potential revenue out. If we're successful, it's budgeted for. We don't have to do a budget amendment. So that's why those are for SCBA's. That's what that grant is for. Ground emergency medical transportation reimbursement. You'll see two of them in here. Ground emergency medical in 2002, Medicare rules by law reduced the amount of money that was being paid to ambulance services over a 5-year period. At the same time, because Medicare and Medicaid are tied together, Medicaid reimbursement rates dropped. And that's when a lot of folks that were providing ambulance services as a source of revenue, heavy source of revenue into fire service, started having problems because that revenue dried up. We run 87% of our call volume are Medicare and Medicaid clients. So when you look at, we can raise our rates to a whole bunch, but when only 13% or actually 11% of your clients are private pay, that gives you, and that's Blue Cross and those type, gives you those kinds of revenues. It's a challenging business to run given the way that it runs if you don't have a mechanism to offset it. 2018, 19, and 17, maybe Tualatin Valley and help sponsor and another organization we're working on creating the GMT program within the state of Oregon. And there was a large push to get that done through the state legislature, and it had to tie into the federal government. It occurred. And there are two types of GMT reimbursement. Both of them are for Medicaid. Medicaid runs two types of processes: fee for service, which is like your basic Medicaid that is federal Medicaid, and not in one of the CCOs or what care? Community care organizations. YCCO is our local Yamhill County Community Care Office. So we have two different application processes. The GMT fee for service is a full-on application process. Show us your rates, show us what your costs are, what your revenue is in the door. And then based off of those numbers, they give us a supplemental payment on the backside. The CCO is a big pot of money that's put into the, when I say big pot of money, that's a theoretically speaking, however many $1 million they get to the state from the federal government. They put it into the CCO pot. They break it up by the number of calls of the people that are eligible to provide that level of service. And they determine after the money is divvied up, what your rate, what your reimbursement is going to be for the year. Right now, our reimbursement from both of these programs is more than we're being given on the base rate. Right now, we're about $487, $493, depending on which program we're running in as the base rate authorization for payment. These plans are giving us $1,000 to $1,100 per call, and we're running about $1,400 to $1,500, depending on the year, Medicaid calls that are eligible for reimbursement. So those are big deals. Those are pretty big revenues that at the state level and at the Twelve Valley and Fire Chiefs Association and the groups that helped pushed it, the state's labor association was working on pushing those forward to get the support of the state federal level. So those were some of those revenues come in. Fire department service fees, those are our fees that we're allowed to charge. So McMinnville Rural District shows an $800,000 deposit. That's the transfer of the assets coming from the cash assets coming from the rural district. It more than likely will be more than that, but at the time when we were building the budget and working through the process, that was a close estimate to where we're at. They've been doing pretty well on their LGIP investment pool, and it looks like that we're going to have more than that, but I don't want to say for sure until we get to that point. And I'm conservative when it comes to budgets because I don't want to cause any harm. Fire department service fees are the charges that the city has an ordinance that allows us to go out and bill vehicle accidents, motor vehicle accidents on transportation ways and those types of things. We will be coming to the district with an ordinance that allows us to do the same thing for the district. As long as we have the capacity for the next 6 months within the city, we have some time to get through that. But we will be coming with a fee schedule to the district to match up to the fees that we're currently charging at the city so that the budget numbers work. The ambulance rates, the vehicle accident fees, all of the fees that we charge as a matter of norm. There are some additional ones if the district wants to look at that right now, not right now, but in the future, we can look at that when we do the ordinance. But right now we're focusing really on just matching up with what we're currently doing with the city so that we can keep our budgets dialed in. Fire med fees, that's the dollars that we take in from the fire med program. We have some donations, some other income is usually if we sell a chassis or an old ambulance or something that's broke down, that's what those are. Collections are those items that are in collections currently for ambulance charges that have been deferred to collection. It breaks off of the rest. Conflagration, we show revenues in there. Those are estimated based on, and they're estimated relatively low. If we were to deploy and go on a calls with the conflagration, we would get reimbursed at the conflagration rates. We always estimate some numbers in there so that we have a potential revenue coming down. We did have Scott went on one, that was last year. We'll have some conflagration money coming in the door, I'm sure, in some way, shape, or form. But interest on LoSAP, we have a length of service program for volunteers. That money is invested in an outside investment pool managed by an investment company for the volunteers. One of the large asset transfers that you'll see down here in line 40, glasses back on, 24 is the LoSAP transfer. So that's $847,000 in the pool gaining interest for when the volunteers retire. Air show income, we have the air show coming up in September. We charge them full rate for costs, overtime for staff, conflag rates for volunteers, and conflag vehicle rates for being out on the flight line for all 4 days this year. Transfers in general fund, that is the ARPA money that I talked about. So that's the dollars coming in from ARPA that will pay for that ambulance that we have on the process. The $4.2 million one on line 23 is the estimated loan that the city will be giving us to pay our costs for the first half of the year. The loan is not the right term, advance. They're paying our costs and holding an account for us when we get to the tax dollars that will pay them back, so. So if you look at the bottom line of your total resources, 19,113,179. That is the total resources coming in the door this year. It sounds like a lot, and that's more than when we first went through the financial process with the thing, but that's because we have the transfer assets, we have the $4 million loan in there, and we have the assets from both the rural district and the LoSAP coming in there. Any questions on the resources? Fire ops. This is what you saw in the city's budget. This is not the duplicate, but this is the fully allocated costs for all the staff and personnel for the second half of the year. These numbers are a little higher because the city, when they budgeted their budgets, including our budget at the first half of the year, they budgeted to, because we have been carrying, us and police have been carrying vacancies for so long, and we were having a hard time filling them. They budgeted to not fill, but they did not budget 3 vacancies for each of us. That didn't mean we couldn't put someone in the position if we hired them, because we have reserves to do that, but they just put them in the budget because they felt it was a more accurate representation. I felt like this is a new district. We need to put the full allocation in the budget. So the one I had the authority over, I put the full allocation in the budget. So though that budget, that second half of the budget allocates for those 3 additional positions, we get them in the door. The numbers you see in both these are duplicate numbers because one is the proposed and the second one is the approved amount, but they're the same regardless. These numbers are for half of the year and even partially less than half of the year, because sometimes our professional services or our IS contracts fire off at full payment at the beginning of the year. So some of our M&S is going to be higher in the first half of the year than it is the second half of the year. Utilities water is in there, utilities and utilities water. Utilities water, we used to be a city department, and water was a payment in lieu of taxes. We are no longer a city department. So that may be something that we take a look at down the road, having a discussion with water and light. But as we go right now, we will be paying water and sewer, as well as the city service fee that was applied to all buildings inside the city. That was not in our budget historically, but it is in this budget. So those are in there. And that is broke out between ambulance and fire. Thank you. Again, this is second half of the year. Costs, all of them are the same as the other one. It just breaks out the second half of the year. The big difference on this line item, page number 58 on this page right here, is $2.4 million in professional services. That's because the first document that was the Fund 99, or the one that is the city's budget, fits into that $2.4 million. All the professional services, all the M&S, everything that was going to be spent, almost everything was going to be spent by the city, fits into professional services for the first half of the year, with plus the second half of the year's M&S, if that makes sense. Everyone understand what I'm saying there? Sort of.
Kind of.
So the first half of the year's, so personnel, M&S, capital, everything that they were spending in the first half of the year as part of their budget goes into professional services, plus our second half professional services, which are actual professional services, attorney's fees, those types of things. So that's why that number is $2 million instead of, I have to go back and look and see what it actually is, like $300,000 or $400,000 in M&S for the second half. And then it has the capital expenditures for fire. We have a vehicle, a new command vehicle for DC-1 in the capital expenditures. We did not put it in the first half because I didn't want to pay the interest rate on the upfront money. So it's in there, but we'll make sure that the purchase occurs after the first half of the first year. And then we have the transfer of the loan that is out there on the vehicles. That's where the fire vehicle principal and fire vehicle interest comes in. That will be for one payment for this year while we build the rest of the transfer of the loan into the transfer, if that makes sense. We had purchased a pickup truck and defibrillators 2 years ago, and we borrowed money from the wastewater services to do that, and that's what this interagency truck and compressor is.
Okay.
Then there's the district startup loan with principal, and then there's the PERS transition liability. Finance director wanted to have PERS transition liability added in there. That would and will be part of the negotiated IGA, second, not the one today, but the second IGA on PERS employee transition, and will be negotiated. But I put it in the budget, so we had it in the event it was decided to go ahead and go forward with that. That will be something that the board decides once we get into negotiating the IGA on asset transfer and personnel transfers and PERS startup. So that is actually figured by the city on a loan, a bond that the city purchased several years ago to buy down their PERS debt. And it was like the fire department's portion at the time of that. Now, I don't know that we get a benefit or do not get a benefit from that loan. As we transition into PERS, we're still waiting for PERS feedback on that. If we don't get a benefit, then I don't know that that'll be something that the board will have to discuss on whether or not that's of value to the board. But I did put it in the budget so that it was covered in the event we had to do that.
So
Go ahead.
the PERS liability, if we get the benefit, we're on the hook for 19,000. If we don't get the benefit, it'll be a lot more.
No, so the PERS transition liability is split between two, Mr. President. Part of it is in the fire one here, and let me go to the ambulance one really quick. That's 35. So overall, it's a $55,000 charge for the 6 months. So if the loan benefits the district by letting us get into a lower cost at PERS, then you would have to decide whether the loan was of value or not to you to do that. And if the loan doesn't, then you would have to decide whether you wanted to pay it for no reason.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah. At the end of the day, fire administration operations, 7 million, fire prevention, life safety, 424, 429, 575, ambulances, 8 million, 759, 710. Total organizational unit left leaves us $994,386 in contingency. We left the entire potential revenue for the year in contingency in case things occurred and came up. You go down just a little further, you have the 800 for the transfer from the rural district and the 850 for the transfer from the LoSAP into reserves. And that's your 113,179 is the number that comes up. Your expenditures are matching your revenues. And that's a balanced budget for the lack of the purpose of budgeting terms. A money in and money out match. The number 900,000 was the number when we first started this process down the road that they anticipated the first year, and we've actually hired 8 people, two peak unit personnel and 6 EMT firefighters into the system. So back when we first started this process, there was a $900,000 first year reserve or contingency available. So we're actually falling into that category as original estimates pretty well, because that was based off of 2021 budgets. So we've processed several step increases and a couple of other things. Let me just step into one more thing I would like to share, and this is on the things that were not in our budget traditionally that the city is charging us, so you can get a feel for service costs that are budgeted for, but as we make decisions in the future, what we're doing. So the way the city does their budget, at IS, excuse me, M&S computer shared charges, the city takes, the IS department takes the number of computers that they work on throughout the year, each department. We get it allocated to so many numbers of computers, and we are computer heavy. Don't get me wrong. We are a computer heavy department. We have a lot of computers. So they break up the shared costs of shared software, shared hardware, those types of things, and then split that up equally, or not equally, but equally by computer amongst the departments. This fire department's share of the shared costs is $79,947. Now, when we start looking at doing services for IS, the city will be an option for us to go to. It's just that we are being moved. We are working towards becoming completely autonomous and independent of the city, so that no matter, and Scott Burke is helping us get there, so that no matter whom we choose to have a contract with, they can remotely access, do the work they need to do, whether it's the city or some other IT company around town, around the world. Our goal is to move to be remote, completely remote. All of our data is stored. All of our data that we use for fire department purposes is either cloud stored or remote stored by contractors. The only thing that we use at city infrastructure is through our MCTs, so we can connect to Wycom, and we use their servers to do that. Now, there are other options to do that also, but so that's what we're moving to, get to the point where we're all Windows 365. Right now, we have a blend. We use the city email, which is Windows 365, but not really. And then all of our servers, and we'll have our own Wi-Fi system off of the city's backbone. We'll have our own internet off of the backbone. We'll have our own email, our own website off of the backbone. All of that will be out there. And at that point, we'll be able to go to and say, hey, okay, so what are you going to do for me for what price? What are you going to do for me for what price? But in this case, the shared costs are one of those costs that I budgeted for the whole year. But if we're up and spooled off and ready to go at the 6-month mark, and we decide not to go with the city or get into an agreement with the city that doesn't include shared costs, and just a per hour charge for work, there's a whole lot of options, but I kind of want to share those things. We have $99,000. Those are actually our costs. That's our software costs for the year on all the softwares we use. We have $100,000, which is a one-time fee for this year for the starter. That's to spin us off and get us independent. That's to get our own Wi-Fi, all the stuff I just talked about. That's what that $100,000 for: our own website, our own emails, our own system, independent of the cities to do that. This hardware software that we have here tonight, and we're looking at upgrading the TVs so that we can do something a little better, so we can have better visual for the board and for the citizens. So that's what that 10,000 is for. We have we have the 5 computers for the board in here. We also have 2 computers for support positions in the event they come online. They also share their capital costs. So that's another charge to us that, so for server maintenance and upgrade and those types of things, that's our share of the capital costs. And the capital, computer capital charges for us are a couple of MCTs that we're buying. So that's what those are there. The staff support is one of the key ones. So I wanted to touch base with everyone. So that's what the city is charging, has estimated to charge us for the year. If the city were to remain as the service provider for those services. So they include a board clerk and administration assistant at a cost of $149,276, finance professional services at $159,000. HR costs at $55,726, and then the IS salaries are $96,350 on top of the split charges up and above. So for service costs, the city is charging us $516,000 for the year for those services. For the whole year. Ones, and then below the additional charges that were not in the budget originally that have been added is the YCOM, the PERS, and the utility, city sewer and sewer fees. I said 160, and I apologize, 167, 600 is what the YCOM cost is. So are there any questions on this? Are there any questions on any of it? Because I'm coming to the end of my presentation. Starting there.
So where does the 516 number come from?
That's the total of the weight of the staff support that they would charge us for the whole year if we stayed under with them for the whole year.
Well, those 4 line items come to 461.
Okay, so I must have done something wrong with my slide. Okay, I apologize. I don't know what I did.
Well, you're C14 through C22, so you're adding in the 55,000.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I did. I slid too far. Sorry about that. I apologize. That was not in my intent. There you go.
Now we're matching up.
Okay. I got grab happy with my slider. That is not in the budget, and that's not the budget number. This was just a slide I put together for purposes of
Okay.
administration. All right,
So
go ahead.
those are annual prices. So if we separate it 6 months, so all those numbers cut in half if we're not using the city for those services.
So they're chart, they've set up a cost for services based on hourly rate. And they're doing timesheets to calculate time used by the fire department so they can charge directly to those accounts. Those were costs that were estimated by the finance director based on positions and what she expected the use to be.
Okay, so that's based on like 2,040 hours. So if we only use, 4 months of that and use like 600 hours and we separate HR, finance, and we're just billed at 40% of whatever that was used.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That feels better.
Yeah, as you know, excuse me for just a second, I'm trying to find the appropriate words. As we move forward in this process and we identify positions that can take on roles and responsibilities within our organization currently, and we've already started doing that with Donna here, doing our minutes, and we can reduce those costs by having, we're paying Donna to be here tonight, but we're not paying the additional cost of the clerk or person in the clerk's position to do those things on top of normal wages. So we are working to try and bring down the costs of the things that we can do internally. There's some things we just can't do, and obviously we have to rely on the city to do payroll right now because we just don't have that capacity. But as we make the moves, part of the discussion at the next meeting will be, what do we do and positions that we should be looking at, and the work that we've done so far to identify the workload and what's going to have to happen. I think you'll see that these are budgeted numbers in the event that we had to continue to use the city for the full year based on their estimates of our use. I do believe their estimates of our use are a little high. I also believe that if we get to a point where we can do some of the stuff ourselves or contract out, we might get a better rate. So those are just some of the things that the board will have to make decisions on as we move into the not too distant future.
So to build on that, Chief, line item 15, the finance professional services, 50% with fire. Does that mean that 160 or 159 is getting split 50% with fire, or
that's correct? Yes, sir. Yeah, that's not half. That's the whole amount, but it's split between the two accounts, the two funds.
Okay, and then is that like, what is that position doing? That's billing ambulances, and then what's it doing on the fire side for fire to absorb 50% of it?
No, it's just at the finance professionals.
Yeah,
So that's basically our finance support staff. It's payroll, A&P, the bills going out the door. Anything that the staff over there, whether it's the director or the accountants have to do for us, that's getting charged to that account. Our internal staff, Jenny does all of our ambulance billing prep and sending it off to our contract billers.
okay. Cause that dollar amount, figured out over a year breaks down to a little over $78 an hour. So I just wanted to make sure that we need to pay for that level of service and it's not just clerical data entry that we're paying $78 an hour for.
Right, those were the numbers. Again, those were the numbers that the finance director provided based on what she thought the split of the level of employee needed to support us moving forward.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Vice President, did you have any questions or? I'm going to stop sharing if there's no questions. And
Only question I had, Chief, was maybe clarification on the IS shared fee.
Yes,
I think you said it was roughly 80,000 plus additional expenses related to personnel costs.
correct. Yeah, yes, it was. Yeah,
And-
96,000 in personnel. And I'm sorry, 80,000, 79,947 plus
Yep.
plus the capital shared, which is another 22,000, 21,000.
And is that consistent with past years' expenses in those areas?
That's correct. That's what we have been, we never paid for IS personnel, but we always paid
Right.
the shared costs. Correct.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yep.
Any other questions for the chief by fellow directors? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for approval of budget resolution 2023-04 as presented.
And if whoever makes the motion could actually read the motion as written on the staff report, I'd appreciate it.
All right,
I'll make it.
I'll make the motion.
I'll make it.
to adopt Resolution 2023-04. And you want me to read how?
The bold stuff under recommendation.
Adopting the 2023-2024 budget in the total amount of $19,113,179 for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023.
Keep going.
Which includes to make appropriations in the amount of $17,463,179 and to impose and categorize the McMinnville Fire District permanent property tax rate of $2 per thousand assessed value for general operations.
I'll second the motion.
President Garland seconded.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Signify by saying nay. Motion carries unanimously of a vote of 5-0. Now, item B would be to review and approve resolution 2023-02, which is a IGA with the city of McMinnville for temporary fire and emergency response services. And I will refer to the chief, but I think he might defer to Truman. I'll let you determine that, chief.
Truman, do you want to talk about Truman, do you want to talk about the changes that were made and agreed upon by the city?
I certainly can. So just a little bit of a review. This is the contract between the fire district and the city that outlines the services that the city's providing according to the budget that you just approved for this interim time period. And we brought this to you at the meeting last Thursday. Got some input from the board. I sent that, made those changes, sent that to Walt Gowell, the attorney for the city. He had a little bit of other kind of tweaking, although I think some of it was trying to just change some language and such. And then we also received a request from the union to add some clarity that nothing related to the collective bargaining agreement that the local union has with the city of McMinnville is going to change under this IGA. So there's some additional language clarifying that, which was always the intent. And so I don't think that makes any substantive change, but it does add a level of clarity to that. So the kind of bullet points things were, there was a request that we exempt out hiring for the chief recruitment process and also the HR and finance positions that this board intends to undertake. The way it's written, the city will be supportive in that process through the HR department and elsewhere, but ultimately you as a board will have the authority to run that process and are the ultimate decision makers on that. For any other position, the regular kind of higher positions, the city will run those recruitments as they normally would. So if there's an open firefighter paramedic position, that would be run through the city. So that's bullet point one. The second one was one that I added that I learned through the process when I was at City of Newburgh, when Newburgh annexed into Tualatin Valley, and that was having some discussion over who's going to keep what records and who's going to be responsible for those. And so there's some language in this document that makes the city the custodian of records during the interim time period, and then contemplates that there'll have to be some discussion about whether the historical records for fire department operations are going to stay with the city, whether they'll transfer to the district with some obligation then assumed by the district to maintain and reply to public records requests and that sort of thing. I just lost my train of thought, but essentially we're going to negotiate that in the next few months, and that will be part of the second IGA that gets drafted. And then at the board's request, I added in some language about mediation. So the dispute resolution process now reads that the parties commit to an informal sit down to try to resolve their differences. If that's unsuccessful, then it can go to arbitration, binding arbitration, but there will be a consideration of whether the issue's ripe for mediation, but it will take both parties to agree to that mediation before a mediator is picked and that's entered into. And I think that from my experience doing this now for 3 decades, you know, if you don't want to drag somebody in mediation that has no intention of budging or otherwise participating in it, because then it's a check the box kind of process that costs you money and doesn't get you anywhere and kind of delays ultimately resolving the issues. And then I see that the chief added in some language about who the designated notice recipient for notices under this agreement was put in there. And I think that covers the changes that were made, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or discussion about the IGA for Truman or the chief? All right, Truman, thank you for working with Walt on that and, getting the quick turnaround. I know with his limited work plan with semi-retirement, it was something that had to be expedited on both ends. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and I'd just like to point out that the city council's considering this probably, in the next half an hour or so. I think was pretty close to the top of their agenda. So
So they vote on that tonight and it passes. We vote on it tonight, then it goes into effective basically with Rich and I signing and Jeff and the mayor signing.
yes, and it's retroactive to July 1st.
Okay. So one last call for any questions or discussion. And hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 2023-02 and IGA with the city of McMinnville for temporary fire and emergency response services.
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution 2023-02 IGA with city of McMinnville for temporary fire emergency response services.
Second. Yes.
I got Vice President Director Smith for the motion, and I didn't catch who the second was.
Dan Sparrow.
All right, thank you, Director Sparrow. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying nay. Motion passes unanimously 5-0. Now takes us to other business, which would be board committees and liaison reports. That is listed as NA, but I did want to let you guys know we would have the YCOM meeting today. It got canceled, so the next YCOM meeting will be in September. If anybody wishes to attend that, I can keep you guys posted of when that meeting is. And typically they're the second Tuesday of each month at 2 p.m. at the courthouse in room 32 where the county commissioners meet. But that time does change, so I'll let you guys know when that gets closer. Board information reports, nothing there. Department reports, I'll start off by calling on local 3099 if they have anything to report, either via Zoom or in the audience.
That doesn't appear in either location, Mr. President.
Okay.
And volunteer report, they requested they be on the 27th meeting, so we'll have them set up for the 27th meeting.
Okay, and anything from you, Chief, or if there's any of your assistant chiefs in the audience?
The one thing that I didn't get an opportunity, actually, we had like 3 structural fires within 90 minutes at our last meeting. The one person who did not get their report out was Assistant Chief Scott Law, our training chief. If you don't mind, I'd like to give him just 5 minutes to touch base on some of the things he's working on and what his priorities are and how he's helping us through this process.
Of course. Thanks for joining us, Assistant Law.
Thank you, President. So again, as Chief introduced, my name is Scott Law. I've been with McMinnville Fire Department since March of '99. Started here as a volunteer, transitioned into our sleeper program, similar to Chief Hannafin, and then worked through private industry for several years. 4 years ago, I took a job with McMinnville Fire full time as training chief, which put me as the station chief for Amity Fire District. At that point, we entered into an intergovernmental agreement July 1 of 2019. And I was essentially the station chief down there, which helped prepare for what we're doing today. Chief and I spent a lot of time working with their board down there, going through board practices, policies, and budgets and budget processes, which are different for the district versus the city. And so that's kind of prepared me to help you guys and to help the organization move forward as we move into the district. Some of the internal projects that I'm working on, like I said, I'm the training officer for the organization. Last year, we put on 4 career academies throughout the year for our hiring processes. which we've gone from a couple of days to a 2-week academy now for our new hires as they come in the door. We're currently in the process of doing one right now, actually. Help review and update our department benchmarks for our operational side. Coordinate a monthly training for our career staff. We hold a monthly 2-hour training the first Wednesday of each month. Also work with our volunteers to build a drill schedule and continue their education and growth through the organization and their involvement. And just recently, one of the projects that Chief Hannafin, myself, and Chief Burton have been working on is a new active threat protocol, which works with the Sheriff's Office, McMinnville Police Department, County Emergency Management, and several other organizations throughout the county for in the event we have what's historically been referred to as a school shooting or some other type of active shooter incident at a community event. We implemented a policy for that and how we respond, set up a unified command with the law enforcement agency and work to provide the best service to the community during that situation. Today, we held our first tabletop active threat scenario with that. And I'll say, I think both sides came away with a greater understanding of each other and the roles that they play and how we're going to be able to grow as a community and better serve the community as we move forward. So that's kind of an exciting thing that we're finally seeing some really good traction on. It's going to continue on through this summer. We've got some activities at some local schools where we can do some actual simulations and so forth throughout that. Hope we never have to do it, but we'll at least be prepared if something were to ever at any of our local events. Also, the department health and safety coordinator. So I help the liaison to the city's safety committee for the last year or so, and we'll continue to do that through this calendar year and work with Chief Slavens, our C shift battalion chief, to help make sure that our safety meetings and safety compliances and everything are met with OSHA and those variety agencies. I've been helping with several grants. I currently wrote the FEMA grant for our SCBAs that we're waiting to hear back from. Worked with some SDAO grants and we'll continue to work through some of those grant processes as well as the rest of the administrative team. I'm currently also working on an SCBA committee as our SCBAs are reaching the end of their life expectancy. We're going to look at the potential of what the next SCBA will be for the organization as we move forward. I oversee our help with our special operations, which is currently our rope technician program or our rope team here. I train regularly with Lincoln County's rope team down in Newport, as well as Cascade Steel has a rope team here in McMinnville, and we train monthly. We have trainings monthly with them. Kind of touched on it earlier. I also work with our volunteers, our suppression volunteers, and in their liaison kind of with the administration, work with the president, Pete Goodman, on a regular basis and interact with them on a pretty much daily basis. I help with our social media, our press releases, and assist Ty Darby with some of the PIO stuff that you probably have seen. As Chief said, last week was a little unusual of a week around here to kick off the first week of the new district. And so help try and get the public informed of all the activities that the organization are doing. Work with Chief Giddings, our volunteer assistant chief, on the LoSAP committee. We guys talked about that in the budget, but there's a committee for that, which Joshua will be talking about, because I think the plan calls for the treasurer to be or the board to have a representative on that committee. And so we'll start engaging in that in the next few weeks, probably on that. Countywide, I'm the chairperson for the county's training association. One of the things 4 years ago when we started is we had some coordinated training, but we really didn't have a formalized program. And so we're still going through the bylaw process, but I'm the chairperson for the county's training association, which oversees the Firefighter One Academy here at McMinnville for all fire departments in Yamhill County and beyond. We've actually expanded to fire departments from Washington County, Marion County, and Polk County, bring resources in and students into our Firefighter One Academy that we host twice per year here. I'm also at least once per year, oftentimes twice per year, conduct pump operator training for various fire departments as well as our own throughout the county, and other classes as deemed necessary. On our County Fire Defense Board, I'm currently was elected the secretary for that organization. So Fire Defense Board secretary. And then as a subcommittee to the Fire Defense Board, we have a conflagration committee that's trying to enhance our effectiveness on responding. And so I'm the chairperson for that. Statewide, I'm the DPSST's DLO or District Liaison Officer for both Lincoln County and Yamhill County, which calls for every 2 years going out to each fire department and conducting training audits and records audits just to make sure they're in compliance with their training requests. And that's a position that basically puts me between DPSST in Salem and the local fire departments. So those are kind of some of the things that I've been keeping with and keeping busy with lately.
No wonder I never see you.
You guys have any questions or? Well, thank you very much.
That's all I have for the chief's report this evening, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Chief Lifer, and thank you, Chief Law, for all you do and keeping us safe and efficient as we can be with the resources that we have. Correspondence, I believe we all received an email from Dennis Gex. So that's in your packet as well. If you didn't receive that email, that's in the packet for you, as anything that's sent to all of us becomes public record. So those will always be included in the following packet. Informational items. I personally don't have any. If any other board directors have any informational items, this would be time to share it. Or if any staff has any informational items they'd like us to be aware of.
I just have a question for Vice President Smith. Will be back in pocket next meeting or still out?
I'll be at the next meeting live and in person.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, hearing nothing else, our next meeting will be in a couple Thursdays, July 20th at 6 p.m. Same room you're sitting in now, Station 1. I will be live in person as well. And I will now adjourn our meeting at 7:08 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.